Thanks for joining us once again. Today's a special day annually for Tesla because on 4 occasions we get the numbers. At this point, 336,000 vehicles were sold during this quarter, and I think we have some surprises for you in terms of the implications of this. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Thanks once again for joining us. If this is your first time, welcome. If you're a repeat visitor, welcome back. We also want to thank our Patreon supporters. If you enjoy the show, would like some better ideas on investing and trading, please join us on Patreon. So, part 1 of the show is sort of generally review the numbers and sort of how the market's reacting. And then part 2 of the show is implications of those numbers that we see going forward. So first of all, as you know, 336,000 is the number that came out. When I saw that number, I was like, wow, it's only down 13%. You know, based on what we've been seeing from Europe and perhaps in the United States, I expected it to be down 40%, maybe 50% as we chase towards $200 a share. So after seeing this number, I was like, oh my gosh, this is stunningly good. So the bottom line is that there are some numbers that I'd like to review with you that you might want to think about. Number 1. According to data we recently read about, the Berlin factory has achieved 500,000 Model Ys produced as of Sunday. Now, the process of build and start of production has been a 5-year process to get to that number. What was also shared in that article was that the Berlin factory is actually producing 4,000 Model Ys per week right now. So if we multiply let's say Fremont, 4,000 in Texas, that's 8,000, 4,000 in Berlin, that's 12,000, and 4,000 in China, that's 16,000 vehicles in 1 week. So why is that a big deal? Well, if you multiply 16,000 vehicles times 3 weeks, let's say for giggles, they actually overproduced on the older Model Ys before the new ones came out. But the retooling of each of those factories took 3 weeks of downtime in order to be ready to go for the new production cycle. So in theory, and obviously the Cybertruck being halted also might have affected those numbers. So in general, what I'm kind of getting at here is, for giggles, let's say 20,000 a week times 3 weeks equals 60,000 vehicles. So let's say the real number is 50. So add 50,000 vehicles to 336 and we now have 386. So what I'm suggesting to you is that the Model Y refresh is actually getting more demand than the old Model Y was. And so I believe what this implies is that instead of being down perhaps 30% is what I expected, but maybe even as high as 50% in terms of sales of Model Y, the reintroduction of 50,000 vehicles suggests that, man, Tesla's numbers might actually be up on what should be one of its worst quarters ever. So I will admit one of the challenges of doing these shows is that the Wall Street Journal mentioned a 13% down, but I'm always amazed when I make a comment because you're sort of battling a large number of very smart people in terms of their perception of things. My expectation for this round of earnings or this round of vehicle sales was we would see the market tank in terms of the hedge fund saying the number wasn't good enough, And then I expected it to wait for the 3 days and see large institutions start to buy again. Now, this is sort of moving into the second part of the show that I described, where the question is, what do I see going forward and why? So my answer going forward is that basically the buyers around the globe are still buying. And Elon's activities has affected buyers in some cases. It's definitely lowered the value of used vehicles, but especially with the refresh of the Model Y, things are actually going pretty well. So I would not be surprised if Tesla's stock price, if the Trump tariff information isn't real bad, to actually be up 10 or 20% over the next 3 to 5 business days, and perhaps even 40% beyond that. Because if your worst sort of quarter of the entire year, you're flatlining to slightly up, that suggests to me that the company is actually doing really well despite a number of headwinds that are market-driven as well as Elon-driven. So for those of you who are holders, I have to admit I'm totally wrong here, because the buyers I thought would disappear seem to not have disappeared, and the buyers in certain places are making up for non-buyers in other places. Let's say Germany is down and other parts of Europe seem to be up. So I would also say that, we get numbers from like the Scandinavian countries, and we get numbers, let's say, from Germany, but there's a whole bunch of different places and countries in the EU, and Tesla has a great value proposition for many of those places. Let's say Poland or other places we never report on because we just don't have access to data on that. And so my suggestion is that high oil prices and low electric prices could really be impacting the middle class across Europe to cause them to keep buying when other people might be reluctant to do so. I would also say that there's another factor that's sneaking on the bottom end. There's a place called Jamaica in the Caribbean. They don't have a Tesla dealership. They do have BYDs being sold there, but they're importing and using electric vehicles in Jamaica. And so the footprint of the Model Ys that are moving around the world is expanding beyond where Tesla is carefully taking care of those places. When you only have 19 moving parts, yes, you do need parts to fix cars that need repair, but it's a lot easier to find 19 parts versus finding 206 parts that might be inside of an ICE vehicle. So in general, I just want to say I think the news is great. I do expect a nice push upwards of the stock price if the Trump tariff news is not horrible. And we big time look forward to your analysis on the thought process. Would be appreciated. Finally, wanted to thank you for joining us once again. Just a reminder on health tips, don't forget your 25 leg lifts a day, preventing knee issues. And also want to encourage you prior to lovemaking, don't forget, have a salad. Skip the heavy meal, a lot more blood flow to all your extremities rather than just your stomach. Have a good day. Thanks once again for joining us, and best of luck on your investing and trading.